So today I'm going to start my talk with a quote from Ernest Holmes. It says, "A change of consciousness does not come by simply willing or wishing. It is not easy to hold the mental attention to an ideal while human experience is discordant, but it is possible. Knowing the truth is not a process of self-hypnosis, but one of a gradual unfoldment of the inner self." All right? So that's what I want to talk about today. A gradual unfoldment of the inner self, even in all of the discord that he just sang about and Ernest Holmes talks about. So you see, we're here to do one thing, and that is to grow spiritually, to change our consciousness, to remember that our awareness is there and we have an ability to make choices. The higher our awareness is that we are a spiritual being, the better our choices become. The better our choices are, the better our lives are, right? So in a class that just concluded, there were some final projects, and some of you were showing me them, and Ellen's had to do with an onion, which reminded me of a story, okay? So, I really do have a little path that I go through to get to things, right? And sometimes you have to go with me on that path, right? So anyway, one of my favorite professors in ministerial school was a man named Reverend Norm Burchard. He is the senior minister at the CSL in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And if you're ever in that area, go to his center. He's dynamic, his heart is just huge, and I love Norm Burchard. So he told this story about one of his professors when he was in ministerial school. He said he was taking this class in spirituality, and the professor walked into the room with a big box of onions, and he handed out onions to all of the students. And he asked each student to begin peeling the onion, layer by layer. Now, as you can imagine, there's tears, they're just screaming, right? They were just peeling and peeling and peeling, and they were having the eyes burning, they were having these reactions to the onions. And then when they got down to the middle, there was a core. And the professor asked, "What is in the core?" Silence, crickets in the room. And finally, one student spoke up and he said, "Nothing. There's nothing in there." And the professor said, "Nothing? It's not nothing. It is God. For underneath each layer in life, there is God. The empty space is loaded with God. No matter where you go, what you see, what you experience, it's all God," is what the professor said. You know, sometimes we say there is no spot where God is not, right? Another way of saying that is wherever you go, whatever you experience, at the core of it is God. The professor was right. See, spirituality emphasizes the oneness of all, the Godness of all. Spirituality is different from religion, okay? Spirituality is a personal, inward experience. It doesn't have anything to do with church attendance. Did I really say that? Matter of fact, one doesn't have to be religious at all to be spiritual. On Facebook a few weeks ago, one of my friends, who's a minister also, posted that religion is the belief in someone else's experience. Spirituality is a belief in your own experience. I think that's a really good distinction. Ernest Holmes wrote this: "Spirituality is the consciousness or awareness that can come from communing with God. Spirituality cannot be taught, but it can be felt. So one should contemplate in order to imbibe the essence of spirit, to speak from its center." So when we get to spirituality, one of the things most of us have to unlearn is a concept that most religions teach us, which is that God is somehow outside of ourselves. It's in a structure, it's in a place, it's in an institution. In some religious teachings, you actually must journey to a certain spot in the world to experience the highest divine, a mecca of sorts. And guess what? God is in that structure. God is in that building. God is in that place. But God is as close as your heart. The longest journey required to encounter God is the journey you take from your head to your heart. Spirituality is in your heart. And there's an interesting, very old story about that. It said in the story that God had the secret of life, and he wanted to hide it. So he gathered together his brightest angels, 3 of them actually, and he said, look, I have the secret of life. Where can I put it so that human beings can't find it, right? The brightest angel of them all, her name was Gloria, and she had a PhD. And she said, I know, put it up in the stars. Certainly humans won't look for it there. God thought about it and said, Gloria, someday people are going to soar into space and they will start looking for the secret of life there. They're going to find it. They have to think of something else. So the next brightest angel, her name was Lucinda, and she raised her hand. I know. Let's put it at the bottom of the sea. Hide it there, and certainly no human will ever find it. God considered this carefully. And then he replied, Lucinda, that's a good suggestion. But someday, they're going to explore the depths of the ocean, and they will find it if we hide it there. And then the least bright angel of them all raised his hand. And Gloria and Lucinda just rolled their eyes. Yes, Michael. And Michael said, put it in their hearts. Certainly people won't look there. And God said, ah. And so that is why the secret of life is actually found in every person's heart, waiting to be discovered. So I'll say it again. The longest journey required to encounter God in all spiritual truth is the one from your head, where you're constantly searching the stars, searching the bottom of the ocean to find the secret of life, to your heart, where the secret of life actually resides, where spirituality lies. See, we possess within us a great divine power. And once we find that secret of life, there's no stopping our greatness or our growth. But what exactly is the secret of life? I believe that it is the understanding and the knowing that everything has God at its core, just like that onion. The force of life is divine, and that force of life is what we breathe. And it's what every other creature, every other human breathes. Everything is made of it. It is in everything, everyone, and every experience. Everything is spirit relating to itself and interacting with itself. Whatever God is, everything else has the potential to express. Ernest Holmes taught us that permanent happiness can only come from an inner sense of certainty, and it cannot be shaken. Science of Mind teaches that when we focus on inward vision, on this indwelling journey, on this indwelling harmony, and as we contemplate its perfection, we will see it manifest in everything. We find ourselves renewed by this divine life, led by divine intelligence, and guided by divine love. We can stop looking at things around us to be the source for our happiness or life satisfaction. You're not going to find it there. And instead start cultivating a joyful beingness within us. And when we start realizing that God is at the center of our very essence, God is at the center of everything, then it's available and ready for us to discover in all things. See, what I believe is that every artist, every creative being, every musician, every poet, every philosopher is expressing the center of themselves. They're expressing that center, and they're getting it out in their creation. They're trying to allow that beauty and that creative thing inside of them out. Every architect and builder, as they're building, they're expressing that internal order, and they're expressing it out I believe that every healer, every parent, every counselor, everyone in that profession is trying to allow that creative love inside of them out. Every athlete is trying to allow their inner strength that is their very being out. They're expressing God in the way that speaks to them. See, I think the more effective one is in life, the more they have made that journey from their head to their heart, and they have found that inner godness in them. Even if that's not what they call it, or that they're not aware of that's what they're doing, I believe that's what they're doing. See, we know that all this physical life and our expressions are temporary. What we create is temporary. But when we tap into that power within, we do it anyway. Holmes says it this way: the artist knows that even though he or she has created something beautiful, it can be destroyed. His real and innermost satisfaction is not in the object, but in the subject, that thing within him which penetrates the mystic splendor of beauty itself. So it is with all our temporary creations. Empires may rise and fall, change and change, the vicissitudes of fortune, the comings and goings of human events, the isolated dramas of our own personal experiences, the temporary or more or less permanent friendships in our lives, inevitably must give way to something bigger. You are the greater sum total of all the experiences you have had. Isn't that special to know that? You know, so our practice becomes the one of making an inner journey on a regular basis, knowing that God is there. You know, we kind of extend an inner wick into the unlimited supply of oil that's always there. We draw it up to fuel our lives. See, if we desire more strength or love or harmony or peace, extending that mental wick down into our hearts, that's how we access that fuel that we need. Whatever it is we need, it's there. And how do you access that inner oil? How do you get there? How do you extend that wick? You do it in this present moment. It only happens in the silence, in this present moment, in the stillness. See, our minds are zooming around. We're zooming into the past, filled with regret, and then we zoom into the future, we're worried about something. But in this moment, in here, is where we find it. See, we're constantly plugged in. We're constantly plugged into our media, our mobile devices, our laptops, and all those screens we have all around us. And me too, I do it too. Our work and our family commitments, we're zooming around. We're pursuing that instant gratification. But when we go inside, we can pursue the wisdom and the strength that's there, that connection with spirit. So what's your routine in the morning, you know? I always say that, you know, we get our bodies really ready for the day. Most of you brush your teeth. Okay, I hope all of you do. Get your clothes all ready and everything. But what have you done to wake up your heart? Wake up your heart every morning. You know, is what I'm doing furthering my vision? Is it accessing my mission and my purpose in life? You know, our routines can get really empty if we're not mindful about them. We're so busy planning and observing the stimulation that's buzzing all around us that many of us never stop and refuel our light. We have to figure out how to habitually make that inner journey from our heads to our hearts. Howard Thurman, who wrote our book of the month, he says this: in the midst of all the sounds rising above all the mingled words, there is a strange voice, but not quite a stranger. A person recognizes it, seems to come from every part of him, but cannot rest itself on any point of sound. He waits. She listens. When all is still, she listens now at a deeper level of silence. In soundless movements, there floats up through all the chambers of his being, encompassing all the tongued cries from many selves, one word: God. And the answer is the same, filling all the living silence before thy face: God, God, God. Howard Thurman. You know, there's an inscription at the Oracle of Delphi, and it says, know thyself. Words of Socrates. Actually, Thales and then Socrates quoted him. Socrates also gave us some other famous words. The unexamined life is not worth living. This philosophy that we study here is all about examining our lives and knowing ourselves, and therein lies the practice, right? To know ourselves inherently means to know more of God. But what I know is that when we make the long journey from our head to our hearts, our lives tend to change. Let me share an example with some of it. Some of you may be familiar with. Evgeny Pashenko is a big example of a shift in consciousness. Pashenko had a good thing going for him. Back in the 90s, the Soviet Union had just broken up and people were beginning to finally pursue some of the things that they wanted to pursue in their dreams. And for Pashenko, that freedom enabled him to construct a clothing factory in his hometown of Vladivostok. Soon business was booming and he had 50 factory workers in his business. But Pashenko felt empty. He felt empty. He had the successful business that he always dreamed was possible, but it wasn't fulfilling him. So after much soul searching, he realized something big. In the Soviet Union, religion had been suppressed for so long by the authorities. And Pashenko was an Orthodox Christian. And he woke up to the reality that he had not been swimming in those waters in so long. And so with greater freedom, it was something deeply calling to him. He had to change his life. So one day he asked all of his friends to meet him. Over vodka, I'm sure. And much to their surprise, he handed them all the keys to his business, his factory. Just walked out. He walked out. His shocked friends actually found out the reason for this abrupt decision by talking to his parents the next day, because Pashenko didn't even explain it. He wanted to be a monk and do this pilgrimage to Jerusalem. That's what he wanted to do. So for 3 years, Pashenko walked 9,320 miles through several countries until he finally reached his destination. Pashenko endured many trials during his journey. He battled extreme weather. He had to fend off all these suspicious people of what he was doing. But he remarked that his faith is what kept him going on his journey. And after he had finished his pilgrimage, Pashenko renamed himself, can't say the name, and he retired to Mount Athos in Greece, where he has since resided in a monastery devoted to his inner life. To his inner life. You know, we might not have fortunes to give away or businesses to hand off to friends, but the point is that the examination of Pashenko's life led him to a truer and more deeper path. He began realizing the things he was pursuing were not hitting him at his core. He was beckoning from something within to a long journey. And you know, Pashenko's story is different than mine in a way, but I understand that feeling of being unfulfilled in what I was doing. My corporate success just didn't hit very close. You know, I achieved every goal in my career I ever set for myself, every goal, but it felt hollow. Until one day in 2005, I realized through much soul searching that while I didn't have to leave my job like Pashenko did, I needed to change my mindset. I made my work my ministry. Back then I wasn't even a minister, but I said my work is now my ministry. And I began, actually for the next 9 years, I still worked in the same job, but I looked at every interaction with each and every person as a way to make a difference in their lives and in my own life. I brought my awareness and my consciousness and my authentic soul to everything I did. I actually went through practitioner studies and ministerial school while I was still at that job, preparing myself for this journey that I take with you. And then I did eventually change my life. Change my name to Rev, actually. But sort of like Pashenko. But so we often hear this thing called the hero's journey. You know, that journey when someone goes out in life and slays the dragon and comes back home and they're a different person. And I think that whole storyline is illustrative of this idea of journeying from your head to your heart. You know, from finding meaning and purpose out there to finding meaning and purpose in here. You know, I have a sign in my office that reminds me constantly to take that journey. You know, I may be a minister, like where my full-time job is this, but it takes practice to stay centered. And so the sign says, be still and know. Be still and know that I am God. Psalms 46:10. See, while I'm still, I remember that the core of everything is God. I return to my source. I get spiritually fed, and I feel lifted up. I just put that little wick into that eternal well that's within me. And once I've made that journey within, I'm ready for the physical journeys of my life. I'm ready for the task of examining my life and helping others take that inward journey. So my invitation to you this week, and the invitation to myself actually, is to spend some time with yourself, by yourself this week. Turn everything off for a bit. No music, no TV, no distractions. Just do nothing but sit with your thoughts and observe them. And ask yourself those big questions I brought up a few weeks ago. Who am I? Why am I here? And how shall I live? Then, in your integrity and in congruence, begin to actually live the answers that lie within you. And servants.